After 4 topsy-turvy years with Donald Trump, Canada is reportedly on track for some early upset from Joe Biden as well. Sources are telling CBC News this morning that Biden is set to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline project on his first day in the White House. So we have extensive coverage for you from both capitals. On the left, our senior Washington editor, Lindsay Duncombe. In Ottawa, Janice McGregor. And Janice, stand by if you will. We'll turn to you for reaction in just a moment. But Lindsay, if you could begin with what we're learning of this morning.
Well, this really is not a surprise. Joe Biden did say during the campaign that he intended to rescind the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. This has been a flashpoint for environmental activists and many in the Democratic Party for a decade. Remember that it was Barack Obama who initially denied the permit when he was Joe Biden's boss, and it was only under Donald Trump, Heather, that the project was green-lighted. And if we look back at the past 4 years, agreeing that the Keystone pipeline should be built is one of the few points of agreement, really, between the government of Canada and the Trump administration. So even though this is not really a surprise, certainly this was something that Canadian officials were prepared to talk about with the Biden administration. They wanted to have some kind of negotiation. The fact that it's happening on day one, alongside such big initiatives such as rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, sends a message. And it's a message that this is an administration that does want to take dramatic climate action. And that is a message to Americans, but it's also a message from the Biden administration to those progressives inside their own party, because there had been criticism that although the climate change action that Joe Biden says he wants to see and the plans that he has are more aggressive than anything that's come before it, it's not aggressive enough for some on the party's left. Already, with these reports, our reports that the permit will be rescinded on day one, there is praise for this action coming from the Democratic Party's progressive wing. Bernie Sanders tweeted that it's a good thing that he's expecting it to happen, and that the Keystone pipeline has been a disaster. So will this be a disaster for Canada-U.S. relations? It was expected to be a flashpoint. This is a point that Justin Trudeau brought up on his initial call with Joe Biden shortly after the election was announced and was called for Joe Biden. The ambassador to the U.S. from Canada has said that the government of Canada continues to support this project, that it is in line with Canada's own climate change action. But those efforts won't necessarily mean so much when that pen hits the paper on Wednesday for the executive order, if indeed that's what happens.
Okay, Lindsay, thank you for that so far. But if you would stand by, because I'd like some more detail about other plans that we're learning as far as the incoming Biden administration's agenda. But I want to bring in Janice for reaction to this. As Lindsay was mentioning, Janice, no surprise. Joe Biden was signaling this months ago, and Justin Trudeau brought it up on their initial call following his election win. Do we expect further official word from the Trudeau government on this? And what kind of reaction are we hearing from other Canadian political leaders so far?
Look, I don't think anyone was under any illusion that it was going to be difficult, Heather, for the Trudeau government to, on the one hand, line up with the Biden administration's climate change goals, but on the other hand, still vigorously defend and support Alberta's oil industry. The company itself was out there last night trying to make the points that it believes this can be a sustainable pipeline project. They've tried to emphasize messages of energy security. Alberta taxpayers, though, it has to be remembered, are now on the hook for this. They have a $1.5 billion stake in this pipeline. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney out very quickly yesterday with a statement talking about how he was deeply concerned about this. I'll just read a section of what the Alberta Premier had to say. He said, if Biden proceeds and cancels this permit, he says, doing so would kill jobs on both sides of the border. weaken the critically important Canada-US relationship and undermine US national security by making the United States more dependent on OPEC oil imports in the future. He also said that his government is going to be working with TC Energy on all the legal avenues available to it. Now, when the Obama administration, as Lindsay was saying, first put a halt to the permit for this pipeline, TransCanada at the time brought a $15 billion lawsuit under the previous NAFTA's Chapter 11 investor protections provisions. Those protections are no longer in the revised North American trade agreement. However, for 3 years only, it is possible for what they call legacy investors to still make a claim. It could be that that's what's being pondered here. Nevertheless, economic consequences for governments and taxpayers and workers very much on people's minds. Opposition leader Erin O'Toole was also quick out with a statement last night. I'll read you a bit of that. He said, at a time when both countries need to focus on job creation and strengthened bilateral relations, I call on the Prime Minister to immediately reach out to the incoming U.S. administration to stop this from happening and stand up for working Canadians across Canada. And he also called on the U.S. administration to meet with the Prime Minister and affected workers before being too quick to make this decision. But, you know, day one decision, hard to see how that might happen. Annamie Paul, the Green Party leader, also out quickly reacting with a tweet, pointing out that, as she said, this is what real climate leadership looks like, doing this on day one, and saying that that is a contrast to what she portrayed as smoke and mirrors policy from Justin Trudeau's Liberals.
Janice, thank you very much. Janice McGregor there, as we bring back Lindsay from Washington. And further to this, not just the Keystone XL pipeline, Lindsay, but Biden's chief of staff is promising a string of executive orders on day one. And in fact, not just day one, but his first days. What else should we be watching for?
Well, they're signaling what they're calling a 10-day blitz of executive orders and actions to deal with 4 crises that the U.S. is facing right now. Climate change is one of them, in addition to this news that the Keystone Pipeline permit would be rescinded. We're also expecting to see, as promised, the Biden administration rejoin the climate change, the Paris Climate Change Agreement. In addition to that, the other crises that the administration are going to attempt to address include, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic downturn as a result of that pandemic, and racial justice. On the pandemic, we can expect Joe Biden to make mask wearing mandatory in federal buildings and in interstate travel. This is going to tie in, Heather, to what we're expecting to be a key point in Biden's address, and that is he's going to call on Americans to wear masks for 100 days in order to save lives. Here's how his administration is framing the crisis from his incoming chief of staff.
The virus is going to get worse before it gets better. I certainly expect we will hit 500,000 deaths sometime in the month of February. People who are contracting the virus today will start to get sick next month. Will add to the death toll in late February, even March. So it's going to take a while to turn this around.
We can also expect an executive action on the first day the Biden administration is in office, which would remove the travel ban, which has been aimed at several Muslim-majority countries, one of the first actions that the Trump administration put in place once it got through its inauguration. So expect a steady stream of actions to overturn some of those most controversial points of the Trump administration. And there's a message to all of this, is that government spending, as we've seen in terms of the legislation that Biden has already proposed and wants to bring forward to Congress on coronavirus, government spending, government action is what is needed to get the United States out of these many, many deep problems the country is facing right now.
Lindsay, thank you very much. Senior Washington editor Lindsay Duncombe.